Hello and welcome back. My name is Rex Robichaux. I'm the GIS administrator here at Virginia DEQ, and welcome to our third of several training videos for our new EDM web mapping tool. This one will focus exclusively on the layer list widget. We'll kind of take a deep dive and look at the layers and functionality that are available through this tool. So with that said, we'll go ahead and kind of jump right in. So what you're looking at is the default extent and the tool as it will initially load when you first go to the environmental data mapper. And up here in the upper right, you'll see layer list. And this is kind of our default list of layers that we make available. This will change over time as either new layers become available internally or externally. As well as, every once in a while there may be a layer that's no longer relevant or fresh, so we can always remove things as that becomes necessary. With that said, first and foremost, the most important thing about the layer list is that it is not fully expanded upon load, because we wanted to highlight all of our DEQ data layers and give maximum real estate to those layers first. So you'll see up here DEQ data layers. These are all data layers that are coming from our DEQ GIS servers. Down here on the bottom, you'll see external data layers, EPA, VGen, etc. If you expand that, all you have to do is click on that gray bar. It will expand it. And now you'll see a variety of layers. We're actually pulling into the EDM from external GIS servers to make available here for convenience and reference for our users. So I wanted to highlight that don't miss that. It is there. It is important. There's a lot of good layers that we're making available, but you just have to know to look for it. And again, just click to expand it. Here you'll find our data that we're pulling in from EPA, from VGen, such as statewide parcels, EPA RCRA data for generators, transporters, treatment storage disposers. We're pulling in FUDs, or formerly used defense sites, from U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. And so you can see those by expanding these layers. And again, everything is just clicking on to turn it off, check it off to turn it off. And then as we work our way down, we actually at the very bottom have a few cached base map layers that aren't available through the base map gallery widget. These are coming largely from VGen's GIS server, so we can check those on. So we see most recent imagery. That always will be updated as years go on. As of right now, it ranges from 2017 to 2019. I believe that the 2020 data will be getting added shortly, and so on and so forth. 2021, it kind of shifts, and you'll see that the state's broken up into approximate thirds by each year. Now, if you want more information on that tiling scheme or the order and geographic extent of those updates, you can look into VGen, as they document all that really well on their website. Alternatively, we also make historical 2002 imagery available. That's largely for use for comparison against the most recent stuff, and you can use our swipe tool for that. Again, we'll have a dedicated video that will kind of dive into the details of using that tool. I'll check these off, and below we find NAPE imagery from USDA. So this is kind of leaf-on imagery. It can be useful since a lot of the VGen stuff is collected over wintertime when it's predominantly leaf-off vegetation. And last but not least, currently we're also showing the Virginia land cover, which is kind of a cache-based map service from VGen. sort of a classified Virginia land use cover. So that's the basic external layers that we're making available or pulling in. Through the DEQ data layers, we'll kind of take a quick look at our categories of data layers. We have this broken out, largely representative of how DEQ is broken out, at least from the perspective of where we get our GIS data from. So this largely mimics our business structure for different areas of DEQ. So starting things at the top, we have our biosolids layers. And it's worth mentioning, I probably should have mentioned this right off the get-go, that every time you see an arrow that's pointing down, it's something that's collapsed, or it's already, expanded. When you see an arrow that's pointing to the right, that means it has sublayers that you can still further expand. So we see all of these are actually just kind of like group headers that contain other layers. So we can go down and start expanding these. Once you get down to this layer, it does look like there's something else to expand, but really that's just going to show you the symbology for that layer. There's nothing else really below. It's just showing you the symbology represented by that layer. But again, it's worth knowing that that's there. So you can see we check that on for biosolids site addresses, and we see those pop up. So working our way down, we have biosolids. Collapse that again. We have our NPS, or nutrient trading banks data. We also have what we're calling land-related layers, but it's really layers that can kind of constitute a variety of things. So alternate water supplies, carbon filtration unit sites, petroleum releases, registered petroleum tank facilities, our solid waste permits, and VRP, or voluntary remediation program site addresses. Again, all of these support, you just check it on, and you'll see the variety. If you want to know what these different classifications mean, you can expand that, and we instantly see that this blue is not active and green is active, and you can do that again for any layer and corresponding symbology. Working our way down further, our pollution response layers, we have our PREP report, or pollution response incident reports. Renewable energy. So here we have our current renewable energy permits, as well as our coastal avian protection zones, or CAPZ. It's actually managed by the Coastal Zone Management Program, but it's worth showing here because these two data sets have a lot of relationship with one another. TMDL and IP watersheds. So these are total maximum daily load and implementation watershed layers and related data. So again, keep forgetting to turn these old layers off as I work my way down. But all similar functionality. Check it on to see the data, check it off to turn it off. Virginia Water Protection, or VWP layers. These contain both our permit points as well as our project boundaries. Water permitting layers, a little bit different. Currently, we only have our VIPDs outfalls available here, but we're hoping to make some additional data available in the near future. Our WQA layer, so this is our biannual water quality assessment integrated report made geospatial format. So the most recent is the actually very recent 2020 final data. This will always constitute the monitoring stations, rivers, estuaries, and reservoirs. And as we work our way down, you'll see I said it was biannual, so we have our 2020, then our 2018, and then back to our 2016 WQA assessment data. So you can kind of look and compare from one assessment to the next. WQM layers, which is our water quality monitoring plan stations. WQS, or water quality standards. Again, this will show you our estuarine waters, tidal flow paths, WQS lakes and reservoirs for trout and all other classifications, as well as streams and rivers, trout, and again for all other classifications. Finally, our watersheds. This is our major river basins throughout Virginia. Chesapeake Bay watershed and the major basins which constitute the Chesapeake Bay. Our Huck 8 watersheds. The Huck 10 watersheds, and kind of working our way down into the Huck 12 or 6th order watersheds. And we also made the National Wetlands Inventory data as well as the National Hydrologic Dataset rivers available. They're not available at this view since these are very feature-rich, very dense data sets. You have to zoom in quite a ways. It's actually worth mentioning. As you'll see here, this layer is still grayed out. That means I'm still zoomed out too far to see that layer turn on. So if I continue to zoom in, you see it turn black or kind of lit up, and now the layer drew. So if you see a layer that's still grayed out, even though it's checked on, you're not seeing anything, make sure you just zoom in far enough. That means that you're not at a zoomed in enough extent to see that layer. And last but not least, the NHD rivers. And finally, last but not least, our reference and admin layers. These are kind of like a general category that don't really fit anywhere else, or they are more of an administrative boundary specific to DEQ or related to DEQ data. So in here we have our soil and water conservation districts, our DEQ offices, which are on by default. They're one of actually only 2 layers that are on by default, offices being one of them. If you were curious about the DEQ region something fell within, you can turn that on and we'll also tell you the region. Census urbanized areas, 2010, we hope to get the 2020 data as soon as it's available, and we'll update that with that 2020 data. EPA ecoregions throughout Virginia, our Virginia county boundaries, which is the other layer that's on by default when the EDM first loads. And the last couple layers, Virginia physiographic regions, and Virginia geology, which again is a very dense feature layer, so you have to zoom in quite a ways to see that turn on. There, as you probably noticed here, 3 tables. These are our tables that we are relating, so these are actually non-spatial in and of themselves, but they're actually related to layers available up here in various locations. So we have 2 tables related to our biosolids data, and then a table associated with our 2020 WQA data as well. You can view this in the attribute table, but again, natively it's non-spatial, so you're not going to see necessarily where something's at. But when we get into the pop-up video, we'll kind of talk about how to work with related data a little bit better. So you can kind of see a couple examples of us whittling down into some of this related data from a future pop-up. So the last thing that's probably worth mentioning are these checkboxes up here on top. Say you turn on a variety of layers, and you'll see this exists for the external data as well. If you hit this, you have a couple of options available: turn all layers on, turn all layers off, expand, or collapse all layers. So if we wanted to just turn on everything, available within a group, you can hit turn on all layers. Likewise, if you have a whole bunch of layers on, you don't want to remember where everything is, you just want to turn everything off, you can do the same thing. So again, it's an easy way just to, let's just say you can't remember where, you have all sorts of things on it, and you just say, I just want a clean slate. Just go in here and say turn off, and it's just going to turn off everything. With that said, there's a couple other things that are probably worth mentioning with regards to the layer list widget. First is this ellipses here that's next to each layer or group of layers. When you go into a layer and you hit that ellipses, you have a few options. One is to open in the attribute table, which we actually saw an example of in the last video. This will pop open that attribute table widget and actually take you to the tab specific to that layer. So it's a nice way to quickly get to that layer's attribute information. Disable pop-up, it's there if you want it. I don't know how frequently that will be used, but if you find yourself frequently like clicking a feature and you're getting a pop-up for another layer, because that's possible if you have multiple coinciding things at the same location, you click pop-up, you might see like 1 of 5 and you really only care about one of those layers. You can go in and disable the pop-up on those other layers so you're not constantly seeing that. And last but not least is this description. When you click description, it's actually going to take you out to the REST endpoint. For those who are familiar, that's like our GIS REST service endpoint. So this is the kind of non-prettified version of the data that's feeding that tool. So if you wanted more information at the REST endpoint, maybe to look into the data itself, you can actually find that by clicking that ellipses and going to description, which will take you out to that REST endpoint. That pretty well covers the layer list. We'll kind of touch on the layer list a little here and there as we look at other tools, because there's a few places in time where it actually kind of is tied in or integrated with other tools or features available. But for the most part, that's the basic navigation, basic layout, and contents of our layer list. So hopefully this was helpful. I believe the next video that we'll be working through will actually deal with those feature pop-ups, or kind of the functionality available through the pop-ups like I just mentioned. So we hope to see you in that video, and again, hope this was helpful for you.